Well, greetings and welcome to this Cloud Admin CON 2016 focus session sponsored by GSX. I'm Roger, the event moderator, and as usual I have a few quick housekeeping items before I introduce our speakers. All participant lines are muted, but we encourage you to use the questions panel to submit any questions or comments you have during today's presentation. We will be addressing questions at the end, and we will conclude in time for those of you who will be joining the next breakout session, which will begin immediately following this one. We are using the Twitter hashtag CloudAdminCon, that's CloudAdminCon, to share the links to the following focus sessions, and those links are also available in your email confirmation. Our presenters for this session are Tim Book and Olivier Renaud. Tim has been with GSX Solutions for 7 years and has held various roles within GSX, with his current being as a technical sales manager. He is a former messaging administrator and has experience with multiple technologies and platforms, as well as pre-sales operations and customer support. Olivier Renaud is a member of the GSX technical sales team and the product management team for almost 3 years now. He has in-depth PowerShell experience and a strong knowledge of Microsoft platforms, including Office 365, Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype for Business. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim to get us started. Tim?
Thanks, Roger, and good morning, good day, everybody, wherever you may be. Today, we're going to go over the agenda here and just talk about what we're going to present here for you all. Give a little bit of context, talk about the different phases of a possible Office 365 migration, and talk about how we're going to access this information inside of the dashboard and get various metrics and things that we're going to be talking about. We'll also talk about some of the available tools that we're going to be using. Olivier is going to be showing some of them. We're going to talk about the different things that are available and then also some of the things that we can also help provide for you. And then we're going to talk about automating the health checks and the reporting as well. So some different strategies to be able to get this information, to get it out to your administrators, to your help desk, whomever that might need to be it. But we're basically looking to help empower you to give you more visibility and control over those cloud services that you could help benefit from and give you some information. So a little bit of the context here. There's some common Office 365 fears and misconceptions that you may be dealing with for yourself or maybe some of your business users or some people in the organization. There's a fear there's no visibility. There's a black box that you have no insight into the internal architecture. A lot of admins are used to things like CPU and RAM and disk and things like that. In 365, there is no visibility into that, or at least there's a perceived visibility. There's the fear that you're no longer responsible for your own environment. Not my problem syndrome if something goes wrong. It's really not the case. Us as administrators, we do still have that responsibility. Ultimately, we're delivering a service to our users. Our end users don't really care about where it's coming from or how it's done internally. They don't really care about how the meal is made. They just want to have a good meal, is the way I always explain it to people. There's a conception or misconception there's less security. It's not my network, so it's not secure. Very common amongst cloud providers and people that are going to the cloud is that it is a less secure environment since you don't have access to the kit. You're not the one managing that. We'll also see that that's also not true there. There's some compatibility things that we may have to worry about as well with existing applications or existing architecture that might not play well with some of our cloud services in 365. And there's also a fear of poor performance. If it's off of my very fast and my very robust network, I don't have access to that, I don't have management over that, there might be some performance issues. There's potentially millions of other customers that are in that tenant that could be causing problems with my tenant. There's also the possibility or the misconception about poor performance. These services are not on my network, so there could be some sort of other outside external force that is affecting that. There's potentially millions of other customers on Office 365 that some people could think that would be affecting my tenant and its performance. As we go over some of this information, you'll see that a lot of this can be alleviated through some of the tools that we can show you and let you gather some information about the performance there. So now what's the reality about all those different fears and misconceptions? There are lots of tools that are available both from Microsoft and many other third parties that can help you get this information and get some insight into the performance. You can monitor different things, performance availability, grab some information from your tenant. A lot of these things can be great, but you've got to get multiple metrics. You've got to be able to pull in this information from multiple sources, relay this information to the right people, and get it in a format that they can understand. You still need to be proactive about this as well. It's not just a matter of, well, somebody else is taking care of this for me now. Microsoft hosts this. They're going to be responsible for it, because we all know what's going to happen there. Your end users, the people that are expecting the service being delivered from you, they're not going to be calling Microsoft. they're going to be calling you. You are the one, as an administrator in your organization, who is responsible for the delivery of the service. Ultimately, the responsibility is going to rely upon you. Hybrid can be a great way to maintain some key mailboxes on-premise, as well as providing service for remote locations with poor performance. So that's one way we can help mitigate some of these fears, whether they be real or not, to help alleviate some of those performance issues that may be perceived there. So having some key infrastructure still on-site in a hybrid mode could be a great way for you to be able to do that. There's lots of other options that are available to you as an administrator to help grab this information and to help proactively alert on this as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Olivier, and he's going to talk about some of the different migration phases as well as some tools that you can use to help grab some of this information. So Olivier, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. So yeah, as you mentioned, there are different phases. You explained a little bit the context, some fears and misconceptions. So I assume everyone listening today is in one of those different phases. So either maybe planning to migrate, currently migrating all of your services, or at least some services that will be hosted in the cloud. And most likely some of you have already migrated in the past and are currently in a run and maintain mode. So any of those phases, you still have, I'm sure, some questions on that user experience. Maybe you have some users asking you questions or complaining about a specific service and the quality of those services. So it's very important to look at various metrics. So the first thing that's really important is about the planning. Even if you're already currently having some services hosted in the cloud, is very important to look back at what are those prerequisites, because if you don't meet prerequisites, the end user experience will be impacted. So obviously there are simple things like the network connectivity, so like the number of hops in between the end user location and the Office 365 data center, the latency, so TCP latency and all those HTTP calls that will be performed, the DNS resolution. So it's really important to look at those different metrics. I really encourage you to look at the bandwidth calculators before you're migrating or even after you migrated, just to check how you compare and if each of your remote sites respect those different metrics. So we've included a link on the last slide, so I encourage you to download the slide deck and access that. There's also a great presentation from the Microsoft team during Ignite. That was we have a link for that. And looking at the bandwidth and calculating the different parameters that can impact on that is basically the number of sites, number of clients, what kind of use they're making of the service. So, for example, what kind of clients they're going to use, their phone, their Outlook on desktop, what kind of protocols you have enabled, the apps that would be mailed enabled and having some traffic. So really important to look at those different metrics. One big thing also is knowing about your architecture, so about the different sites that you have, all those remote offices, where do they connect, what central sites they connect to, do they have internet breakout and they egress directly to the internet. And then knowing a little bit about all the information such as the proportion of distribution groups, resource equipment mailboxes, if you're using public folders or not, where is the archiving performed, and if you're hybrid or full cloud. So really important to look at those different things. We'll highlight a little bit after what tools you can use to look at that. And then during the migration, so there are still a lot of aspect to consider. So the configuration is usually a main source for some kind of issues that might arise in the future. So looking at your AD, Azure AD Connect, ADFS, the DNS resolution. Keeping track of user adoption is really important because you might not have some issues when people are not using a service and then have the real load on those platforms coming a little bit later down the road. So really need to look at all those aspects, and the performance is something that we get asked a lot. All of our clients, they have always some performance issue in specific sites, so it's really important for you to track that performance, know what does it mean when it's good, and make sure that the bandwidth and latency is aligned with the prerequisites. And all of those kind of still apply in run and maintain. You might have more like recurrent tasks, like you need to be alerted when some services are not accessible, need to do some management of the licenses, the different sites, but mostly it's ensuring that the services you provide to the end users are being used and that they are good quality so that end users are satisfied using them and they're not going to keep calling help desk complaining about that, which may be a source of cost for your organization and a lot of time spent, not necessarily on the good task that you want to do. So let's take a look first at what is important. So when I kept talking about performance, what does it mean when the performance is good? Well, there's no way to really tell if you don't have specific facts and specific metrics. So one of the main thing, and again, Microsoft has a couple of papers on that to explain that you really need to establish some kind of baseline so that you know what it means when it's good. And the baseline, there are some like simple baseline that you should have in between different points. So for example, the time from a client computer to the egress point. So the egress point being the last point of your internal network before it goes out on the internet. So this is important to know. Same for in between the egress point and Office 365, you need to check the latency, and we'll give you some hints right after about what tools you can use to know those metrics. But it's really important to know that. It's important to know as well what to use, because the ping latency might not be the same as the TCP latency, and really everything is HTTP based nowadays, so you need to be looking at TCP latency. Then you need to know what location, what servers or people or end users connecting to from their offices. So all of that needs to be looked at, measured, and quantified so that when there are issues that arise in specific sites, you have something to compare to and you can look at the metrics and understand what has changed, what is impacting the end user experience. So really important to do that. Again, some great articles that we have linked for in the last slides that you should check from Microsoft. So next slide, the Microsoft tools. So of course all of you know the Office 365 portal, so you have the service help dashboard in there that gives you the incident from Office 365, but this is only really a view from the data center, the Microsoft data center. So you need something to check the connectivity from your sites, from your clients to your tenants. So one thing that most of you should know, especially like if you were an on-prem Exchange admin before, is like the remote connectivity analyzer. So that tool is cloud-based, but it's good to check connectivity and configuration, such as the auto discover, all the active sync settings. So this is a great starting point. But then there's a new tool that Microsoft has made available called the Support and Recovery Assistant for Office 365. So this is client-based. You can run that on any workstation. And it's going to be performing connectivity and performance checks. So they've actually included what they used to call the OCPA, so the Client Performance Analyzer, into this. So let's take a quick look at this together. I've already run some tests a couple of weeks ago that you can see the end result here. But basically this is really designed for end users, but you can use it as well. So end users, they would be able to say, okay, I'm having issues with Outlook and I have issues with my password, or it's taking too long. So whatever they complain about, they can kind of look at it directly. But I advise you as an admin to look at the advanced diagnostics at the bottom, and basically you can run some performance checks. So right now they only have Exchange Online, but they're going to be adding some other support for the other platforms. You can do, for example, that one, check Exchange Online network connectivity, and then basically it already asked me if this is the machine that I want to run it from, and it's going to run a series of tests that you can see here. From a network perspective, connecting to Office 365, looking at the DNS resolution, the latency from a ping perspective, but also HTTP latency, so doing that TCP test I mentioned. So this is kind of a great starting point as well, because you're doing those checks from here and you're checking with the different metrics that Microsoft recommends. So if you're not sure of what are the good metrics, good baseline, and you haven't established anything, this can be great to kind of do a health checkup of your environment. So it takes a little bit of time to run, but I really encourage you to take a look at that. So next thing I want to show you is what you can do really more granularity in your command line or PowerShell window. So there are still some PowerShell commands available to test connection to a mailbox, like test MAPI connectivity. But there are also, depending on what version of Windows you're using, a lot of tools that have been added for the network. So things like test-net connection. So of course, I assume that most of you are familiar with like a ping and traceroute that has always been available. So even those are better than nothing, because it's going to give you metrics. And then the thing I want to highlight is there are some great tools from sysinternals about performing some pings using TCP. So let's take a quick look. Here I have a PowerShell window. So this is a Windows 10 machine. So to run that test -net connection, you need Windows Server 2012 R2 or later, or as a client OS, Windows 8.1 or later. So test net connection, as you can see here, you point to which endpoint you want to connect, what port you want to do, and then instead of doing a ping, this is going to be doing a TCP ping. And you can see if it has worked out fine, what it resolved, and what it connected to. So this can be great. I've downloaded the tools I've mentioned from sysinternals. So doing a ping can be a good thing, but again, the ping is only going to be sending an ICMP trap, and in a lot of cases this might be blocked. So see here, like I'm not able to access that. This is probably blocked before I can really reach out to the internet. So I like to use the PS ping tool. So same thing, it works with Outlook, if I can actually spell something right, .com. And you need to mention the port as well, and this is going to connect to that, and see it's the same concept as the ping. It's just that it's really going to be sending TCP packets, and so after the warm-up you can see a little bit that connection standpoint. Okay, so great thing to look at the different metrics. There are a lot of other tools. Everything is included at the end, but if you had to look at only one thing, I would really encourage to start with the support and recovery assistant, and then if you need to do a little bit more automation, probably check out this tool. So quick conclusion about what we've seen. So as you can see, there are some tools available. You can do some scripting if you need to do some like recurring reports on that performance and find ways to send them or export them. It needs a little bit of manual programming or scripting, but it's doable. But this is helpful, and using those tools are really good for troubleshooting performance issues when you deploy that recovery assistant from multiple locations. Of course, they're free, so that's a good point. It's allowing you to have a bit more visibility, and it doesn't take a lot of time to use them, and it provides you with metrics that you don't have otherwise. So the only downsides are that, yes, it takes a little bit of time to configure. If you're scripting and automating a little bit, you need some time to maintain that. So if you need something easier and better than that, well, there are some tools out there, and with Tim, we would like to show you a little bit what you can do with GSX to have more visibility over your environment and those Office 365 services.
Well, thanks, Olivier. Really good information there. Thanks for showing everybody that. Like Olivier had mentioned, we do provide some of the capabilities here and some different tools that can help you get a grasp on the environment and get this information and a lot of the metrics that Olivier was pointing out earlier. A little bit about us at GSX here. We were founded in 1996. Our headquarters is over in Switzerland in Geneva. We have offices all throughout the globe here. Olivier and myself are located here in the U.S. We've got offices in Europe, out in Asia. We have more than 600 customers in 40 countries, so a very large cross-section of customers here. And if we go to the next slide here, we'll show a little bit about our cross-section and some of our references. We work across all different business units, all different kinds of businesses, everything from consulting and IT services, manufacturing, financial, so a very large cross-section of companies, everything down from 20 to 50 user companies all the way up to 200,000 plus that we've dealt with here at GSX. And some of our solutions for 365 here. So it's a nice cross-section, a suite of tools we like to say here for your 365 environment. Everything on the performance and monitoring side of things, testing services with true end-user scenarios, comparing services from multiple locations, bottleneck identification, a centralized dashboard for all of this information. We have services that are around our tools as well as other tools in your 365 environment as well, being able to assist with migration assessments and checking and user adoption and performance baselining. So we do provide a lot of those services around there. There are management tools as well to be able to take action on large numbers of users and group actions and track configuration changes inside your tenant. And then the reporting side of things, license information and security reports, audit information, mobile adoption. So GSX really does provide a suite of tools to be able to use in your 365 environment to give you a better overall idea of performance, availability, reporting services, and management of the environment as well. And then so we have our end-to-end Office 365 monitoring, kind of what I like to describe as our bread and butter as far as our products are concerned. There are lots of different services and moving parts associated with your 365 tenant environment. The Exchange Online piece, SharePoint Online, Skype for Business. There's different services that are provided both by Microsoft and maybe hosted internally in your environment as well. Your on-prem Exchange, for example, if you're running a hybrid environment. There's Azure AD Connect and DirSync and ADFS. There's the network itself, being able to check diagnostics and latency on the network itself. Classic Windows Server monitoring, SQL servers, other collaboration suites, other mobility platforms. Lots of different things that encompass this service you provide to your users, Office 365. So there's lots of different things that we can do inside of here to help give you some insight into those platforms and to the availability and performance of them as well. So we have what we call the GSX Gizmo Dashboard here. Real-time service delivery monitoring from where your users are. The concept that we have is what we call the Robot User, the GSX Robot User. You would have different deployments of these robot users in your environment at different critical network locations. Couple in the US, couple in Europe, couple in Asia, wherever you want to deploy these. All of them are going to be monitoring your systems and your environment, both in the cloud and on-prem if you still have that as well. Reporting on this information, measuring the performance, the true end-user scenarios that are being conducted and tested here. It's going to consolidate and centralize all of that information into the GSX Gizmo Dashboard. Very, very simple to set these up here. One view for the entire environment, again, both on-prem and online, and then different user interfaces or different user performance metrics that you get in one interface here, which is a very, very powerful thing. And then a little bit more about the GSX Robot User itself. Again, these are deployments that you put in your environment at critical network locations. They're going to be performing end-user scenarios, doing things like a user would, opening mailboxes and routing email messages, accessing OneDrive locations and SharePoint sites, etc., etc. Network latency diagnostics as well, measuring the performance of the network out to your 365 tenant. It's a real-time dashboard up 24/7 to be able to give you alerting and reporting at any time you want. Then there's also some smart alerting, predictive alerting as well, based upon all the different information that it's gathering to help give you some insight into the environment, to consolidate the alerting from multiple locations, help to get you a handle on any performance problems that can be in the environment. It's really easy to install, can be installed anywhere, centrally managed as well again. So you deploy these robot users in your environment from one console, very, very easy and quick to do that. Testing both cloud and on-premise like I had mentioned before. And the major point again is that this end-to-end testing and troubleshooting, getting both the network layer, the application layer, your tenant, your internal environment, hopefully to be able to catch anything before it becomes a service interruption in your environment. Very powerful and custom alerting too. You can set up different profiles, the smart alerting that I had mentioned before, to have different alerting paths and destination based upon time, and some predictive alerting as well that we're going to talk about. And then we also integrate with other enterprise management tools that you might have in place as well. So we do have some management packs that you can use. We have external alerting capabilities and being able to launch custom command lines to help protect your other investments you might already have from a global or enterprise perspective. So you're not going to be losing any visibility there as well. And here's a little look at our central dashboard here that encompass all of your services for your 365 tenant. Again, everything centralized from these robot users into one dashboard. You have different RBAC that you can do inside of here to give different people access to different sites if you want. You can manage your cloud service, hybrid identities, and any remaining on-premise servers at the same time. So again, if you still have an investment in your on-prem kit, that can be covered by GSX as well. Centralized management and control of the robot users, very easy to navigate, advanced reporting and graphing capabilities. So what we're actually going to do here is go into a little bit of a demo of that. So I will show you here called the GSX Gizmo and the robot user concept. So we should see here my GSX Gizmo dashboard. Again, web-based interface that anybody can log into. You can create different access roles for it and give people access to the information that they need. But the major concept here is that I have all of my different platforms, all the different collaboration suites, Exchange, SharePoint, Skype for Business, etc., all the different types of platforms as well. So your on-prem stuff and your online stuff, all inside of here, and I can see this all very quickly from the dashboard. I can drill down into this information, and I can see all my different servers, all my different scenarios that are having some sort of issue or problem, ones that are having some sort of threshold issue, let's say, and everything else that seems to be working well. I can drill down in there, and I can say, just give me all of my critical alerts. What things do I need to address possibly right now? I've got all my warnings here, or anything that's in a degraded state. And then I can filter everything that looks normal here. On the left-hand side, I can create different dashboards that give me different views into the environment. Here I've got my all dashboard here. But I can drill down and say, show me everything by platform. So I've got my ActiveSync scenarios, for example. I have my Skype for Business monitoring, my Exchange on-prem and online environments. I can view them and see what kinds of information I can get from each of the platforms. I can split things up by service. I can split things up by source, which would be our different GSX Robot Users, let's say. Let's pretend that these are location number 1, location number 2, location number 3. I can see what the performance and availability looks like from each of those perspectives, from, for example, New York and from Chicago and from Reykjavik and from Singapore. Wherever I have these deployed, I can see what the performance looks like, just like a user would. I've got the same kind of split up here by location. So here I've got the robot users deployed in different data centers around the world, and I can see what everything looks like from those locations. So I've also built a dashboard here for Office 365. Let's drill down into that and take a look at the kinds of information we can see here. I've got all my different services and all my different testing and platforms that I'm monitoring here. I've got Skype for Business, Exchange Online scenarios, ADFS, proxy information, and SharePoint Online. Again, these are just dashboards that we thought would be nice for an Office 365 environment. You can customize these with any information you want to add on here that we gather. Let's go into ADFS, for example. We can start taking a look at all the different components that make up all of the ADFS testing that we're doing. We've got our scan information. Now I have a frozen dashboard here, so it's not going to be real-time information just for our demo purposes. But this is the type of information that you would see inside of here. We've got the different components that make up the checking of this particular platform, in this case ADFS. I've got system-level information, certificate information, and federation services, synchronization and everything. I've got different graphs that I can customize and change around here. So this dashboard we've set up as a default, but there's nothing stopping me from coming in here and totally customizing what reports are shown here, where everything is shown. Very, very flexible reporting that we had mentioned earlier. I can drill down into that information specifically over a time period. So let's look at our server and network performance. Say we're running on certain issues during this time period, I can start drilling down and see what the performance looked like over this particular time period. In this case, we're talking about just raw server performance and access, network and response time and things like that. For ADFS specifically, we've got different performance counters that we can look at and graph. So anything that we related to that, we can get information on and see if there's any issues in the environment. Let's hop back out to our 365 dashboard. Go here. And let's take a look at Exchange Online. We've got the different components that make up the Exchange Online testing scenarios that we do, the network perspective, trace route and ping and things like that, end user scenarios as well, which are very, very critical. We've got different tests that we perform, opening mailboxes, creating email, resolving usernames, downloading attachments, things that your users in your tenant would be doing for Exchange, for example. We also have them for Skype for Business and SharePoint Online, but things that they would be doing that would be part of the service that's being delivered to them. So I can see what those scenario performance look like down here. Again, I can customize these graphs, drill down into the information, export this information, perform reporting on them. Here we've got the network information down below, DNS resolution time, packet loss information. There's lots of different metrics that you can put inside of here. So using this dashboard here, you can hopefully get an idea of what it looks like in different environments or different locations in your environment and see what kinds of things are failing. Because there's lots of different moving parts, lots of different systems that are involved in the service being delivered to your end users. It's called 365. Again, it's the network, it's DNS servers, it's directory synchronization and federation services, it's the tenant itself, the network to the tenant. So all these different things that you want to be monitoring from this one dashboard here that can give you an idea of where the problem might lie in the environment, alert you to an issue, but not only alert you to an issue, but also measure this performance over long periods of time and see if there's any issues that might be coming up down the pipe, let's say. So if you notice, for example, that everything looks within spec for most of my robot users that I have deployed there, but all of a sudden Chicago is starting to go with outside of spec. It's taking 20 extra milliseconds on average to open up a connection to the tenant. It's taking 30 extra seconds to route email messages for some reason. Everything still seems to be working, but there's some sort of performance degradation in the environment. Using these tools that we've shown you to, as well as the GSX solution here, we can help you find and pinpoint these issues either when they happen or before they become problems that are affecting the service being delivered to your users. So that was a very quick demo of the GSX Gizmo and Robot User concept. We have lots of different information that we can share with you and documentation, and our technical team is always willing to answer any questions you might have about that. We can provide any information you might need. So just to kind of recap and summarize everything that we had talked about. End-to-end Office 365 monitoring solution. So there are multiple components, multiple different kinds of testing and metrics that you should be gathering and performing that are going to help drive end-user satisfaction, to help alert you to any potential problems here. So internal health status of 365, for example, network latency, using the services and performing tests just like a user would, alerting on critical statistics if they become out of spec. These are all very, very important things that you want to be monitoring as an administrator. Again, we had talked about very early in the presentation, there's a lot of fear and misconception about not having this information readily available to you because you're now on the cloud. Well, we're here, and hopefully we've shown you that a lot of this information, a lot of these different types of metrics that you want to be gathering can be gathered using different tools, including GSX, to provide this information to your management or to provide it for yourself to ultimately deliver a better end-user experience. And a little bit more about our GSX offerings here at GSX. It's not just on the monitoring side of things and the performance availability. That's the stuff we had talked about today with GSX Monitor and the Gizmo product. But we also do have different metrics and different dashboards that we can provide for you for 365. We have the 365 usage dashboard, which provide advanced usage reporting and analytics. Things like the consumption of your 365 tenant, top mail senders and receivers, top OneDrive users, adoption of Skype for Business, license distribution information, utilization if you need more licenses. So that's a great dashboard to help you get a hold on your tenant itself. And then the 365 Enterprise Management Dashboard. Here we're talking about user and license administration, being able to perform large batch actions on large groups of users in an automated fashion. So provisioning and creating users inside your tenant, license assignment, decoupling of licenses to be able to, for example, give somebody their E3 license, but you don't want to give them the SharePoint license. And then also the delegation of this information and access too. To be able to get a lot of this information, you have to give somebody administrative access inside of your tenant. It's not something you always want to do with a junior level type administrator or help desk or even line of business people that want to be able to do this themselves for their particular user base or OUs, let's say. Using the 365 dashboards that we have provided here, you can split that access amongst the users inside of the line of business or the help desk to be able to only access the things that you want them to do. So to only have them be able to add users but not delete them, or only be able to manage the licenses for the sales OU or for the financial OU. Any kind of scenario you want to come up with here, you can use inside the dashboard. Very, very flexible, we had mentioned before. So just want to make sure we mention that we have other dashboards that are available that we can also talk to you about if you have any interest in that as well. And then just to kind of sum everything up, we have links in here to everything that Olivier talked about, the 365 portal connectivity tools and PowerShell references, the 365 recovery assistant. Very, very good session that a lot of our technical team had attended at Ignite this year about planning performance and bandwidth 365. Highly recommend watching that session. It was very, very informative too here. And then, of course, our website over here at GSX Solutions. So any questions, you can always pop over there, reach out to our team here. So with that, I will turn it back over to our moderator, Roger, here.
Thank you very much, Tim. And for those of you that would like to get a copy of today's presentation, the folks at GSX will be following up with all of you after today's conference. We'll be happy to provide you a copy of that, which will include those links to those resources. We do have several questions that I'm going to go right into. The first one is, and I'll just throw these out to either of you, Tim or Olivier, can you run the support and recovery tool from a remote location?
Yeah, so good question. So as I showed, the support and recovery tool, it will perform the test from where you run it. So yes, you can do it from a remote location, but you would need to run the tool on that workstation, on that server where you want to do that. You cannot just point to a workstation host name or IP address and being run in the background. So yes, you can do it, but you have to log into that location.
All right, very good. And the next question we have is, does GSX provide services around Office 365 migrations?
Yeah, I'll take that. Good question there. While we don't necessarily provide services around the actual migration process itself, we do provide some services around helping you get an idea of how the migration is going and the progress of it. Using the different dashboards that you have, you can gather a lot of this information here that will give you an idea about adoption rates and progress here, and also performance before and after a migration. Let's say, for example, from your on-prem Exchange 2013 moving to 365. Our technical team can come in using these tools and help provide a report, an audit of the environment to again see what it looks like before and after the migration, give you checkpoints during the progress, and they'll provide some recommendations and service reports around that. So definitely do provide that. We'd be happy to provide any information you might need about that too.
Great. And speaking of on-prem Exchange, next question is, can GSX monitor on-premises servers?
Yeah, definitely, and I apologize if it wasn't that clear about that before. A lot of the presentation today was premised around 365 and a lot of the tools that you can do and the different performance scenarios you can do, but we do fully support Exchange going all the way back to 2007. I think technically 2003 we can do still too. Hopefully you're not running any of that. But 2007 and above, all your on-prem stuff, as well as the different platforms too, so your SharePoint and your Lync or Skype for Business and everything like that. All in one dashboard, same kind of concepts with the user scenario, seeing what it looks like from those different locations, definitely supported inside the dashboard.
Great, and this will have to be the last question we take. What permissions are required to use the tools that have been mentioned?
So I can answer that. So I showed different things, so let's take one by one. The first thing I mentioned was like the portal. So to access like only the service health dashboard, you actually don't need to be a global admin. You can just be a service admin and you'll be able to access that. Then for the different command lists that I've showed, everything that's really network based, so doing the ping, the test-net connection, traceroute, or the PS ping, you don't need anything. Like the only thing you need is like the endpoint, and the only prerequisites would be probably where you run that, because the test-net connection is only part of a PowerShell 5 on Windows 8.1 or later, and Server 2012 R2 and later. And then the different checks that are performed by the recovery tool, the Office 365 support and recovery tool, it's actually just going to use the credentials doing an auto discovery, so you only need to have a mailbox that you can target, and that's about it. And it's the same concept for what we do in the user scenarios in the GSX tool. Like we're going to do some network checks, accessing specific mailboxes, so you need like some kind of monitoring mailbox that you can provide access to, and then we need some permissions to access the Office 365 Health Dashboard as well, so that you can be alerted and trigger alerts based on that.
Well, we will have to wrap up with that one. So on behalf of TechGenix, I want to thank you, Olivier and Tim, for joining us today. And we, of course, want to thank GSX for making it possible for us to bring you today's session. Don't forget to join us for the next focus session using the separate link, which is available in your confirmation email and can also be found at the Twitter hashtag Cloud Admin CON. And that concludes this session. Thanks all for joining us, and you may now disconnect.